Welcome to Equip, Build, and Mature. As I like to do on Tuesdays, I want to share a word of encouragement with you. Some of the last words that Jesus spoke before he died sound like an agonizing cry. My God, why have you abandoned me? We read this in Mark chapter 15, verse 34. That was a direct quote from the first line of Psalm 22. King David wrote the psalm about 1,000 years before Jesus was born. Jesus was not losing his faith on the cross. He was quoting scripture. In ancient Jewish tradition, when a rabbi quoted the first line of a psalm, he was praying the entire psalm. Every person standing at the cross who knew the Torah would have recognized exactly what he was doing. He was not crying out in defeat. He was pointing them to a prophecy. Psalm 22 was written roughly 1,000 years before the Roman Empire invented crucifixion. Yet, I want you to notice what David wrote in Psalm 22, verse 16. They pierced my hands and my feet. Crucifixion did not exist when David wrote these words. He had no framework for it, no historical reference. Yet there it is, written into the Jewish scriptures 1,000 years before that method of execution was conceived. The prophecy was fulfilled. There's more. In Psalm 22, verse 18, it reads, They divided my garments among themselves, and they cast lots for my clothing. The Roman soldiers who stood beneath the cross, they gambled for the robe of a dying man and fulfilled a line of poetry written by a Hebrew king who had been dead for 1,000 years. Then we see in Psalm 22, verse 17, where it reads, I can count on my bones. People look and they stare at me. Crucifixion dislocated nearly every major joint in the body. The victim hung suspended while the weight of their own body pulled their skeleton apart. Every bone became visible beneath the skin. David described it in a song 1,000 years earlier. Then we read again, my God, why have you abandoned me? That is the opening line of the most detailed prophecy of crucifixion ever written. But we need to understand, Psalm 22 does not end in agony. If we only know the first verse, we read the crucifixion scene and assume that Jesus died in great despair. We hear the cry, we feel the anguish, and we assume the cross ended in darkness. It did not. The final verses of Psalm 22 declare total, absolute, cosmic victory. It says in 22:27, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before you. Again, Psalm 22:27. And then we see 22:30-31. The next generation will be told about the Lord. They will come and declare his righteousness to a people yet to be born. They will declare what he has done. He has done it. The Hebrew word is a single thundering declaration that scholars translate as the equivalent of one word, finished. On the cross, with his last breath, Jesus spoke that word. It is finished. Jesus did not die quoting the beginning of Psalm 22. He died fulfilling the end of Psalm 22. By quoting the opening line, he was telling every person who knew the scriptures exactly how the story would end. Not in defeat, not at all, but in total victory. If we do not understand the connection of Jesus' words in Psalm 22, we pass over the deeper, more significant meaning. Hearing Jesus' words through the message of Psalm 22 shows us that the cry and the triumph, they're the same song. Understanding the larger context transforms a familiar moment of anguish into the most deliberate declaration in world history. Jesus knew how it all would end. He always knew how it would all end. Jesus was not announcing his death. My God, why have you abandoned me? He was announcing his victory. It is important for us to see the thread that runs throughout the entirety of God's written word, connecting Psalm 22 to the gospel accounts of Jesus' crucifixion. See the connection of David's words to the soldiers casting lots, making the connection between he had done it to it is finished. Psalm 22:6 reads, "But I am a worm, and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by people." It's interesting here because the Hebrew word for worm in this verse is tola, the crimson word. When the tola worm dies, the crimson worm, when it dies, it climbs onto a tree, the body breaks open, and it releases a scarlet dye that stains everything under it. After 3 days, the crimson residue turns white. Jesus quoted from Psalm 22 from a tree. His body was broken, his blood poured out scarlet, and on the 3rd day, everything changed. The ram God provided on Mount Moriah to spare Isaac appeared on the same mountain where the temple would later be built and where Jesus would ultimately be crucified. And Abraham named that place, "The Lord will provide." And 2,000 years later, God did exactly that. God provided on that same spot. Jesus spoke a Greek word, tetelestai. It is finished. That word was stamped on receipts in the Roman Empire. It meant paid in full. Jesus' final declaration was not a statement of ending, but it was a statement of completion. A cosmic debt marked as settled. Context changes everything. From the cross, in what looked like the darkest hour in history, Jesus quoted his ancestor David to show the fulfillment of the greatest promise ever made. Today I want to encourage you, as you hear the cry, do not miss the triumph below it. God did not speak from the cross by accident. God never does anything by accident. Guys, hope you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Thanks.